All right. My name is Bill Mehegan, Program Manager for Care Quality in the RCE. I'll be moderating this FHIR panel as we discuss the current state of affairs, what obstacles still remain, and what the future holds for FHIR-based exchange under Care Quality and TAPCA, this new thing, in case you've never heard of it. So we're just going to dive right in. I originally had some slides prepared, but I feel like the last few sessions have really wet your whistle as far as FHIR goes, so you don't need too much of a preamble. So I'm just going to start off by asking you guys a question, and as we discussed, introduce yourself, and then go into your answer. So Mike, can you first introduce yourself and tell us what FHIR use cases you and your org participate in today?
Yeah, hi everyone. So Michael McCune from the Health Exchange. I would say the most successful use case we have on the Health Exchange to date is with the FDA. We've worked with their BEST unit, the Biologics Effectiveness Safety Unit, to on a project basically that deals with adverse event reporting. So we primarily concentrated on when, for example, COVID is diagnosed. There could be a time-based correlation to when an immunization took place before that, and that would be a potential adverse event that gets reported over to the FDA. We brought together 12 organizations that participated in that project, and that exchange has actually made it into production. So we have both a pull and push use case. So the push would be actually detecting a potential adverse event to get reported to the FDA, and then if the FDA feels that a case is warranted or potentially warranted, it would follow up and query the provider system and gather the clinical data to validate that that there's actually an adverse event. And some other use cases that we have out there besides that's public health, and some other use cases we have coming up that are more in the concept stage or proof of concept would be working with the National Institute of Health for their All of Us project. We're starting to just get involvement with that with Ochin, one of our participants. And another thing we have ongoing is provider-payer exchange. We are working on eventually taking that to production, and actually we see prior auth as probably the low-hanging fruit, if you will, on that project. And we just have a press release actually today that should be coming out today, where we are offering an incentive program for both providers and payers to join that program and exchange as part of the prior auth.
All right. Jason Vogt. I am the product manager of our FHIR and structured documents development team at Meditech. I'm also the technical chair of the Commonwealth STIG committee. And then I'm also an active participant in the Argonaut, Da Vinci, and FAST FHIR accelerators and a few other things there. At Meditech, we're fully compliant with the 21st Century Cures rule, so we have all the US core APIs available for both a 3.1.1 instance and a 4.0.0 instance of US core, plus Smart App Launch, plus bulk data, plus patient access, all those different pieces that are available as part of that implementation. We also, in Commonwealth specifically, we're the first implementer of many to do document exchange via FHIR. So every document that's exchanged in Commonwealth from Meditech started out as a FHIR transaction, whether we asked for it via FHIR or somebody got it from us via FHIR as well. And then the big things that are on our roadmap that we're working on right now is we're releasing our 6.1.0 US core version to all of our California sites right away to help cover the rules that California has implemented there. And then the next big thing is, as you mentioned, prior auth. We were working on the Da Vinci burden reduction implementation guides to make sure that we can handle all three of those guides, to make sure that we can bring prior authorization and that improved workflow, i.e. reduce the burden to our clinicians through that workflow. Andrei.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrei Zudin. I'm CTO and co-founder of HealthGorilla, where I'm leading the creation of our health interoperability platform with connectivity to frameworks such as Care Quality Commonwealth eHealth Exchange, and these days we're busy with compliance, technical compliance to TEFCA QHIN technical framework. As for FHIR use cases, majority of our customers connect to the platform using our FHIR APIs, and this unlocks use cases like FHIR server, where they read and write and store data in our warehouse. Another use case would be FHIR-based exchange of clinical history, and we are offering CDA to FHIR conversion services as part of it. And finally, access to our diagnostic network, where provider organizations and diagnostic facilities place orders, get results electronically using FHIR resources. And we are active participant in pilots and connectathons for FHIR-based exchange with Care Quality and RCE, and we're also participating in the pilot for the prior authorization use case with Mike's team.
I'm Dave Pyke. I work for Point-Click Care. I've had the luck to be working on the TEFCA with the RCE as working on the QTF. I'm also the technical director for the FHIR Accelerator, and on and on and on, and I'm not going to keep going because we do have limited time. What we're working now, the biggest use case and what we're most proud of is the SANER project. That's situational awareness for novel epidemic response. That was spun up during the pandemic to try to make it so that we could do bed and other capabilities exchange live, because we found out that, well, in most cases it was being faxed, and usually long after it was useful was actually able to be read. So we're working on a pilot for that. We did one in Texas. We're working on another one in a couple other states. So we're very proud of that. Point-Click Care is also working on bringing its entire platform to be FHIR ready. We've been building out that capability for the past year, and we're hoping to get it live very soon.
Hello, I'm Jeff Taylor. I work for SureScripts as an architect. Our most successful FHIR implementation is our record locator and exchange, where we connect to the Care Quality Network, but we have our customers use FHIR to connect to us, so they didn't have to learn IHE. We have event notifications and specialty medications work too.
All right. So it seems like that a lot of FHIR integrations are occurring in the wild. So people have heard a lot today about what Care Quality and TEFCA are going to offer on that front. And the difference maker or the game changer is really FHIR integrations at scale. So the one thing that we spent considerable time this year testing in the connectathons was dynamic registration using UDAP. So that is what will allow FHIR to happen at scale. We've done it in a laboratory, right? We've done it in test environments at these connectathons, but there still seems to be some hesitation around being able to do that in prod. So talk to me about whether or not you think any manual work will still be needed to establish that trust. That should be removed. That whole manual process should be removed with dynamic registration in UDAP. Mike, I think you had some thoughts on this. I see you nodding your head. I know you have thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, so I think FHIR has done really well where there's a user in the workflow. So, clinician-based, maybe launching a Smart on FHIR app, they have, they're going to have access to all the data for that particular patient that's involved with that Smart on FHIR launch. Other things like individual access, where it's actually the first person patient, querying for their data. I think that's also pretty well established by, support by most EHR vendors. Where actually I think we're having more trouble is sort of the back end where there's no user involved with FHIR, right? That's where basically traditional SOAP web services really excel at, right? That's what we do almost every day on the care quality network, health exchange network, and so on. We have a very established trust, at least for treatment-based exchange, without a user, involved in that workflow to get the clinical data. But where I see FHIR not doing so well is just that, where there isn't a user involved. So in that case, I think obviously, TEFCA is taking steps to get there, like Bill's mentioning, the dynamic client registration, HL7 UDAP are both, core pieces there that can facilitate that. Yeah, I mean, we're not quite there yet, I think, with EHR vendor support of those technologies. So that's what really concerns me, especially for the health exchange. We have a very federated model. So if it's point-to-point with FHIR, yeah, there's definitely a concern that point-to-point is not going to come to fruition just simply because there's not EHR vendor support. So.
Yeah, I guess so. You asked about the manual process, right? So like from a client to a server, we can register all day, right? But the only way that works, right, is with implementation of it, right? So I have to have a server, I have to have a certificate as a client, you have to have a certificate as a server, and then we can talk. So that has to happen, right? That has to be implemented by somebody. The certificates have to be, given to the individuals, and they need to be utilized. So that part is still gonna happen. But once you set it up once, right, now you can set it up for all the clients. I can put it on my server, it's a trusted care quality certificate. Andrei can come, Dave can come, Jeff can come, everybody can come, and they can all register and they can all get access to my server. I just had to load that certificate once. So is there still manual processing in this? Yes, we're still gonna have to implement it, we still have to set up, we still have to get certificates, all those different pieces. But once we get that set up and the ecosystem is there, now we can really start turning all the lights on, right? And flipping the switches and everybody can start to talk to each other. And do we have it all figured out? No. But I think we can do client credential grant pretty well from a B2B transaction. We can get user authorization workflows there, whether the patient has to sign in 10 different times to get 10 different portals. Those aren't solved yet, but we're working towards those things as a solution. So I'm not saying it's all baked, but we have a good recipe to be able to make the cake. And now we're just trying to figure out which pieces make sense. Do we need to pull back an ingredient here, add an ingredient there? And that's where I think where we're at right now. But we still have to work on that implementation manually to then turn all the lights on, build that infrastructure, and then start turning the electrical network on.
I would elaborate a little bit more about what Mike said. We've been to these testing exercises 4 or 5 times now. I believe we resolved all, if not all, technical challenges, but beyond technical interoperability, there is semantic interoperability that talks about data standards, which leads us to data usability issues. And this is why important the meaning of data, where context of data is important. And while we have systems technically talking to each other, they not necessarily understand each other, right? This problem started with, it's not new, it started with document-based exchange. It's not completely resolved in the FHIR world. And a lot of different participants, a lot of different vendors of the FHIR endpoints. So this is where we're spending a lot of time and efforts in semantic interoperability these days.
I mean, to your point, Bill, I mean, UDAP is a wonderful solution to a very specific problem, which is how do we automate something that was a very manual process of getting something called a client ID, which usually was done through email. That's great. UDAP is a wonderful key and lock combination, solves that problem. Unfortunately, when the doors are different shape, when the houses are different shape, when everything behind that can change, that's where the manual processes have to come in. Data usability and simply understanding what to ask for, how to get it, and how to interpret what you get. And sometimes that's going to take human beings to get involved. FHIR is a wonderful solution, but it's not a panacea. There will always be small problems, large problems, insurmountable problems that come from not having everything standardized to the 50th second degree because you can't. So yes, there will be still some humans involved. There's nothing we can do to prevent that, or maybe we shouldn't. But at least we're getting there one step at a time.
I mean, one of the hard parts is that we still have local policies stopping exchange. I mean, FHIR is great. It's kind of like a solution looking for a problem. And if we can't get everyone to agree that if you have access to the data, you have legal access, you have a purpose of use that's valid, you should be able to talk to me without having to have a separate contract. And until we can get local policies to understand that this is valid and this is trustworthy, we're always going to have this little nuanced celebration between each group.
All right. So what gaps exist today in FHIR that you first feel need to be addressed? So obviously this works pretty well for treatment. It's maybe not fully baked for patient access, as we've heard throughout the course of today. Then you take in the whole conundrum of payer to provider to patient exchange. So what do we have to fix next? Like what's on the top of your list as far as what you'd like to see done with FHIR to get us to the next level, to make it even better?
I'll go.
You go. I'll go second.
Lots of things is the short answer.
You get to pick two.
I get to pick two? Okay. Back end. Everybody already has a FHIR stack in front of their systems as of January of this year because that was regulation. If you're certified health, you can do FHIR. However, that doesn't solve the myriad problems that come in the back end. Semantic interoperability, governance, policy, all of these things still sit out there. You can't solve those with a lovely JSON scripted piece of information. You have to sit down and say, okay, wait a minute. We need a policy to address what happens when this request comes in, this person comes in, this data type comes in. How do we deal with all this? And that's a lot of things that have been missed in the conversation. It isn't about, hey, I can get you Smile CDR, we'll get you hooked up to your database, and we're done. No, that gets you the first step, and then you need to deal with all the policy implications, the governance implications, blah, 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 blah. Whether you're a provider or a payer, you're going to have multiple systems that all need to talk to each other. Payers sometimes have multiple systems that need to talk to each other to respond to one FHIR query. These are all things that need to be addressed as part of the interoperability journey. So just because we have the FHIR issue in hand, we don't have all the back-end issues going. That was my one.
All right. I'll go with two. I'll try to be quick. The first one is everyone has to be a server, right? And there's lots of servers out there, but there's not a lot of clients out there. And there's very little regulations or levers on those clients and what they're supposed to do. Clearly, there are some organizations that are trying to help with that, with Karen and others, to help facilitate that and make sure that everyone's a good actor. But having servers is great. If you don't have everybody asking for the data or doing it in the right way, it doesn't work. And then the next big step with really talking about for patient access, right, is federated authorization, right? I mentioned you may have to go sign in at 10 different places to get your data. That's a burden to every patient that's trying to get their data, right? I want to be able to sign in once. I need to say yes, I'm authorizing this network to get my data, and then go get my data, right? I don't want to do it 10 times. I want to do it once, and the other 9 need to trust that. And that is the next big step, I feel like, in this ecosystem that we need to take between federated identity, 3-tiered OAuth, 3-legged OAuth, all those different pieces. There's solutions out there, but that's where the next big step needs to come from patient access, is to really make that federated authorization stand up across all of care quality, all of TEFCA, whichever network or use case you want to pick, but across the ecosystem.
To me, the biggest gap is the absence of production-ready, production-level FHIR directory as a general concept as it relates to FHIR APIs and patient access APIs, like something what Lantern website, Lantern portal hosts. This directory would keep information necessary to access these endpoints. And if we would have this directory, it would vastly improve standardization, accessibility, and discovery of the FHIR services, FHIR endpoints.
Well, I was going to say directory, but
You can just say plus
since
one.
that's been plus one that since that's been stolen, really just the idea that we can talk to everyone and have it be the same. Like there's no real certification that you're going to react in the way you expect when I connect you as a server. And when like UDAP has the possibility of putting a certification in to say like I'm certified to do these certain things, and when I talk to you, I have a really good understanding that you're going to do these things because you passed the certification and this is how good you are. So I know that when I talk to you, I trust your data, I know where it's going to be, I know the resources you're going to use. And I think we just need to get better at it.
Right, and potentially how to make sure that the implementation guides that you support are clear so that you know exactly what implementations you support. And I should have a clear expectation of what to expect from that server too, because you're doing US Core 610 or you're doing whatever guide you want to say, dot whatever 3 numbers you want to put with it.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, I guess, what I said earlier about having the back-end type FHIR applications working where there's not a user involved in the workflow. That has to be as easy to do, basically, as it is with SOAP. I'm surprised to be saying that, but but it has to be that easy. Right now, with the SOAP model, it's mostly just mutual trust, mutual TLS, they call it, authentication with certificates. And then you might have some checks on the security portion of the message about who's the source system, and maybe what's the role of the user that queried. Maybe some checks on that. But as long as that, and UDAP's I guess going to satisfy some of that. Yeah, I think a lot of systems that we've connected to, at least through some projects we worked on with specifically FDA. It just wasn't that easy to get over the connection hurdles with the provider or the data holder. There was multiple levels of security. It wasn't just up to the OAuth server to get you in the front door. There were multiple levels of security that had to be worked out above and beyond what we have in the SOAP model. So.
All right. So I guess I sort of know the answer to my first question, but then I have a bunch of follow-ups after this. Do you expect to participate in FHIR-based exchange under TEPCA and or Kara Quality? I'm assuming you wouldn't be on the stage if your answer wasn't yes. But beyond that, can you talk about your rollout plans, what those might look like? Will you be offering this to a certain type of client? A certain type of use case, anything you can share along those lines?
I'll go first because I like to say it. We have our UDAP server ready. We have it in an version. It is ready to go to production and be released. We've been with Andrei and Dave and others many times in these connect-a-thons. We've gone through a lot of testing. We were ready. We have it out there. I think our biggest, we're going to turn treatment on and we'll turn on patient access if we can. But I think I said the patient access will be, you hit the server, you have to authorize, be ready to sign in with your portal, and we'll give you the data. You may have to do that 10 times, but you will get your data. I think those will be on from a Meditech perspective right away. I feel like we have the ability there. Obviously, we're still working through some of the registration nuances, I'll call them, is like how do we do scopes and how do you know what scopes they can get and access and those types of things. But we can work through those easily. But like we're really ready to turn it on and start seeing like what can happen. But I think my one concern is when we turn it on, there's not going to be a lot of clients ready to start utilizing it.
Yeah, I would love to acknowledge all the improvements and the advancements that FHIR brought into healthcare interoperability. So we definitely will be supporting as a as a candidate QHIN these days, and hopefully QHIN in the future, will be supporting the FHIR-based exchange, both facilitated and non-brokered from day one. As Jason mentioned, we're testing like for more than a year, and we're ready to go. And as for use cases, we're excited for FHIR, especially because it is open. It will open new use cases and new purposes of use.
So the answer is we are an applicant QHIN, so we are planning on supporting it, but our rollout timelines completely depend on our entities that we are connected to be able to support it. I mean, without having someone to talk back to us, we're just a front. So,
Right.
Well,
we will
remember, the
support it.
question was also from a care quality perspective as well.
Well, if we can get our endpoints to adhere and join, then yes, but it's still down to local policy.
Right.
I think for us, not being an applicant or candidate QHIN, we're looking at exactly how we want to do this. We've been a care quality implementer for a long time. We enjoy working on it. But for us, because of the wide breadth of LTC, especially skilled nursing, and the things that we do, there hasn't been a lot of uptake for FHIR for exchange amongst our clientele. There hasn't been a lot of drive. So it's because we want to make interoperability happen. We want to work with EDs, we want to work with PCPs, we want to work with everybody, that we're driving forward with this. We want to make interoperability happen and then let our clients sign on to it as they will. And that's going to be something that's more of a challenge because, LTC has not received meaningful use funding. It hasn't received the kind of things that drove EHRs to make interoperability happen. And so it'll be a slower process, but one we're actively working on and hope to have, rolling out in time for next year.
So next I'd like to talk about data filtering. For example, do you hold any clinical data back when responding to individual access services queries? Do you have any perspectives on how to handle this from treatment versus non-treatment points of view? Very open-ended question there. Jason?
Sure.
I feel like you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I mean, we try to break it into 3 buckets. We got the patient access, we got user access, and we got client credential or client access, right? System access for everyone, whatever your favorite term is for that. For user access, or for patient access, right, we're really just trying to say, okay, what can you see in our portal today? And we want to try to mirror that, right? Like if the result has been marked sensitive because they want to talk to the patient before they see the result on the portal, we want to try to, try to support that same type of technology in our FHIR access. For user access, we're really just falling back to the same user dictionaries. Can you see it in the chart? If you can see it in the chart, you can see it in the app. Pretty simple there. The system one, that's where we have a little bit more of a question, right? Because we don't always know where that data is going because it's just a system to system. So if it's treatment, it's likely going to say, yeah, that is probably all of it. Here you go. We may exclude the confidential data. Maybe you don't get the mental health data, those types of things. Those are the things we're really trying to figure out where consent modeling and things like that in FHIR could really help facilitate whether you get to see that or not based on possibly certifications or other things like that. But so those are the things, it's mostly all except for those few things that we kind of already hold back in treatment for document exchange. So those are kind of the 3 buckets we put things in and the 3 models that we're trying to adhere to right now for Meditech as we make those APIs available to the masses.
As a network, we really cannot have an opinion on filtering all the data. So that's always up to our members, participants, and their sub-participants. We give them tools per patient, per person, per exchange purpose to share the information back. I can only talk from the experience on number of like transactions and like from the operations perspective, that the information that is released by our members for treatment purpose and for patient access is pretty much the same.
Yeah, I think my comments are very similar to Andrei's, because our network's very federated. So we're really counting on the EHR vendors and such to support data filtering. And I think in that respect with FHIR, you know, there's, at least built into FHIR, there's not really a great concept of data filtering. I mean, you could certainly do it, but there's not fine-grained data filtering built into the definition of various FHIR resources like immunizations or observations, et cetera, et cetera. You can filter down to like the type of the resource, but you can't necessarily, there's nothing to say that you filter out certain data elements or et cetera. Not that you can't do it, I'm just saying it's not, that's not something, that's not really a built-in concept. And most of the vendor support I see only goes down to a data type, like an observation of type labs or vitals or et cetera. So you can do it down to a type, but not down nitty-gritty into that. So that's our concern with basically EHR vendor support, that they'll come around to have something natively built out of box to do that work.
I mean, as a network also, our opinion is not public, however you want to say that. But I think the interesting part about data filtering is when we talk about like all these states' laws that are coming out that are starting to say you can transmit certain things or can't transmit certain things, and we're going to have to start building out our interior muscles to define where requests are coming from, where they're going, and if they should be able to exchange that piece of data. And I mean, so we're building that into our infrastructure right now, but it's going to become incredibly complex very soon.
Yeah, that's the problem we run into as well. We're in almost every state in the union, and regulation at the national level is nice and easy. There's one, and then you get down to the state, regional, local, and the regulations can change. And we had somebody lovely talking about Texas, and we won't talk about Texas more. But that makes it really difficult to set policy, to set both technical implementation and governance policy, to say, okay, if we get a provider from this state who's querying about a patient who's lived in these 4 states, we'll give them this, but not if they're there. And wait, no, we can't. We'll send them what we can. And it's going to be a large build out. And that's something that's going to affect everybody in this room, is how do you get past all of the requirements that the laws say you can, you must, or you should not, or you shall not give this kind of data depending on who's asking and where they're from.
And are there going to be enough mechanisms to know that when the patient actually wants that data? Have we restricted it so far that we can't actually get their data to them anymore because all the other rules have basically said, like, you can't exchange this, and now we don't know who's asking for it, or it's really hard, and now we can't give them the data we want because of all the policies that we're trying to enforce to make sure that we're not sharing the specific types of data that these states are regulating these days. And it wasn't Texas this time, it's California and Maryland.
Sorry. So what challenges are you currently faced with your FHIR integrations, and do you see those challenges getting better, worse, or the same in a Care Quality or TEFCA-based exchange, FHIR-based exchange ecosystem?
I mean, I think a lot of the challenges are really what we're trying to solve, right? How do we do this at scale? How do we do it across the network? How do we turn all the lights on, build that infrastructure, all that? Like, I mean, those are the concerns I have. I mean, I think between the fast accelerator, the fast FHIR accelerator, we made a lot of progress on that. The UDAP IG is a big step forward to a problem that, was waiting for a solution. So I think it's there. I think we have a strong foundation to build off of now. But now it is literally about real-world testing, getting clients and servers together, building that community and making sure that that can happen. And I don't know if 8 QHINs, 7 QHIN applicants at this level can build that when the FHIR community that is this big doesn't have a seat at the table.
I think, and one of the things that came up earlier was the whole, individual access and having to deal with 20 different identities to log into all these ones. Finding a solution to create we would all dream of one identity that could be used across, however many providers is the goal. And I know that the FHIR at Scale Task Force is working towards that. They have a project to create digital identity, but it's uphill work. There's a lot of issues around creating an identity that sticks, that can be accepted from Meditech to Epic to Cerner to keep going as long as we want. So that's going to be a big challenge, is dealing with that, making it so that a person, whether that's a clinician, an individual, or whoever, doesn't have to have an identity at each location. They have an identity that will be accepted by anybody attached to a query. And that's going to take a while and take a lot of work.
I mean, I think we're missing broad adoption within the whole healthcare ecosystem, not just providers. I mean, we have a lot more people who are in this group. And the problem is, once you solve with FHIR, if everyone's not in it, I still have to use IET. I still have to use some other connection methodology to talk to them. So I mean, until we can get everybody onto the same platform, we're not going to be able to do it in a single, simple way.
Yeah, I would say our biggest challenge in our network is just getting folks to come to the table for FHIR Exchange. And that's why we're using incentive programs to get that exchange jump-started. I think it's been relatively effective, actually, somewhat to my surprise. I think once you get a little bit of critical mass going, then other people say, oh, well, I'm not the guinea pig anymore, so maybe I'll join in. So that's been fairly effective, but eventually, we need more critical mass, just get this going.
And for us, the challenge is, for some of our customers, for some of our participants, facilitated, QHIN facilitated, or network facilitated exchange is the challenge on its own, because a lot of responsibilities, a lot of implementation, a lot of efforts go to the participants to support this kind of exchange, while we certainly understand the value and why a lot of organizations want to use facilitated peer-to-peer connections. Still, there are a lot of participants that want to keep using network services and participate in FHIR-based exchange as well. So we're looking forward for the next chapter, which is networked or brokered FHIR exchange.
All right. So as I look out into the audience, I'm getting the wrap it up sign. So that's what I'll do. I'll wrap it up. I look forward, I just want to say this is my 5th time being up here, or there were virtual events during COVID as well, talking about FHIR. I believe that in 2024, when I'm on this stage or whatever city we're in for this annual meeting, that instead of talking about theories about how to make FHIR-based exchange happen in production, we're going to be talking about actual FHIR-based exchange that occurred in production. So thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you.